Here it is, Nicola Mirkovic.
Hi, Marcelo. Hello, everybody.
Bonjour, comment ça va, monsieur?
Ça va très bien, merci. Un peu chaud.
Très bien. Un peu chaud, c'est très chaud. C'est vraiment très chaud ici en Italie. Bon, ça va bien. Ça va bien. C'est mieux que le frais.
Oui, c'est
Le froid.
Exactement.
Well, hello, Nicola. How are you doing?
Hi there.
Back to English. It's still the word language, the word most spoken language, more or less.
Yeah.
So the idea today, I have kind of briefed you before a little bit on the idea. The idea is to have the idea of the environment of the countries before world wars or big wars. So in the case of France, we could include Napoleonic. We don't have to go that further, but we can understand more or less how the environment of France was during the period. Of course, having some idea about Germany and everyone that was around France. One of the things that I always see during these periods is some vacuum of power. Mm-hmm. Which is, you see this during the Bolshevik Revolution. You see a weak Tsar. You see this before the French Revolution. You see a weak king or emperor. Basically, you see this before any type of revolutions, and especially any type of wars. It's potato. It's more or less the same thing, just with countries instead of people. So I will leave you free to start where you want. If you want to start on World War I, or if you want to point out some special moment that you believe is important for the understanding, and of course bringing this and draw some parallels with what we have today, what we're seeing today. A weak president of the most powerful country on the planet, a weak establishment in Europe, and people going cuckoo. So, what do you? How do you see this in the past and with today?
France is a very old country, old nation, and France has been to war, one of the countries who's been the most to war, because it is an old country. It's been a very strong power for a long time, for centuries, on the European continent. France was, I would say, started out in the 5th century, a very big country, and Europe at that time, countries would wage a lot of wars. So until I would say the beginning of the 20th century, going to war was something every generation of French had done practically. We could go even to prehistoric times, but starting the moment when Clovis became the king of the Franks. And since that time, French have always been to war, as all the other European people. This is not something new to Europe. So going to war was something which was unfortunately, quite normal. And Thucydide said that wars is the normal thing, that peace times are just like some sort of an armistice between wars, and that the normal thing is that we fight. So there are so many wars we can analyze in France, and most of these wars are actually waged. The way we've waged them have changed. We had at one moment chivalry with civilian population, which were not supposed to be touched. There was practically no such thing as an attack on civilians. This is something that in the code of honor of chivalry, French would not do it, as the German chivalry or the Spanish chivalry. Nobody would do that. Those were things that there were red lines that people wouldn't cross, and civilians were something like that. And then starting with, practically with the Napoleonic Wars and then First World War, we saw a lot of these attacks and the civilians getting more and more I would say involved, and actually the idea, something which changed a lot in France concerning armies, with the French Revolution, where there were conscripts, and we would tell the French that they had to go to the army, whether they were noblemen or not. They had to go fight. They had to go fight for the Republic, then for the Empire, then again for the Republic. And this is something which changed quite a lot in the French mentality. The fact that they're starting to fight for a nation. This was nothing new. Before there was a kingdom, then there was a nation after the French Revolution, then for the French, the ideas, for the French Revolution. And something which I've learned in my historical research on France is that there's been, a big wound which still hasn't mended even up today, and the French still don't agree between themselves. They've always been fighting since. Anybody who's read Asterix and Obelix, the best thing that French do is fight between each other. A lot of people do that, but French are really experts in that, in fighting between each other. But the French still haven't got over the French Revolution. And at that time, really, we started seeing that there are different perceptions of what France is, which was probably not the case before the French Revolution, where everything was quite local, that we didn't have the communication that we have today. And there wasn't this idea that I'm going to die for an idea. I'm going to die for my family. I'm going to die for my God. I'm going to die for my land, for sure. But for an idea, people just really didn't care before. I would think that people from the medieval ages, if they heard us speaking about left and right, they would say, this is irrelevant to them. They would discuss on a specific topic and they would disagree or agree on that topic. But I don't think they would put these maybe you think they may go, they might have been split. I don't know. But definitely this ideology coming into the French society, and this fact that French were starting to fight in the Napoleonic Wars to spread an idea of what freedom was, of what equality was, of what liberty was, and this was something quite new. And the French didn't all agree on this fact that they had to go to war for that. And actually, when there was the Vandean Revolution, counter-revolution, that was during the French Revolution, around at the end of the 18th century, after the Bastille in 1789, the reason why the west of France, there was an uprising, they were extremely Catholic. They were against the revolution and the ideas of the revolution but the reason they went to fight the French army at that time is that they did not want to be enrolled in the French army to go fight against the Prussians. So this is actually quite interesting.
So basically they wanted to fight because they didn't want to fight.
Yeah, exactly. They went to war against les Bleus, against the military of the French Revolution. Because they were against it, but they remained more or less peaceful, and they voiced their concern. They wanted the king. They were very shocked by the fact that the revolutionaries had cut the head off of the king. But the reason what sparked which led to this huge unrest in the Vendée and in Brittany and in some parts of Normandy was because at that moment the ideologists behind the French Revolution said, you must go fight for officially our ideology, and not for your land, not for your king, not for your God, for the ideology. And this is something which is quite interesting, because this has become the norm in a lot of the wars that we've had since then, at least for the French, that okay, we're going to start fighting for an ideology. Again, we've seen it in the 20th century and the 21st century. France goes to humanitarian wars. We don't fight for petroleum, we don't fight for gas, we don't fight for natural resources. We fight for democracy. We fight for human rights. We fight against big, bad, ugly dictators, and for the poor people who are suffering. And this idea has really entrenched itself in the I would say in the political in the politics of French society, that we are no longer this country just as we did in old times. The French used to fight. Okay, they wanted land, they wanted minerals, they wanted iron. They didn't say, we're going to go fight these people because they've had access to the sea and we don't, or they have access to iron or to ore or to I don't know whatever, and we don't. So they would be more, I would say, more honest. At the end, they were still fighting, there was still war, it was still terrible, but they were more honest on the reasons why they were doing this. What's interesting is that,
let me just make a parenthesis here. There's one thing that Alexander Mercury's always mentioned is that from the Durante, he always says that by the time where the British Empire was an empire, they were more honest. They were going to war because they needed more land, because they needed minerals or whatever. They just needed more, or wanted more. They wanted to be more richer. And, they could just go to war and perhaps lose against, for example, the Zulus. and the queen could have tea with the Zulu king 1 week later on the palace. While now we have a war where the leaders of the countries refuse to talk to the party involved in the war, and I mean, of course, the Putin. They just don't want to talk to the guy.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
What is the deal? Because it's the idea. They cannot. The good guys cannot talk to the demon. It's very easy, clear to understand that.
Exactly, and I think we've got such a Manichaean view today on what war is, and we've gotten far away from what the chivalry ideas or this respect that you could have for an adversary, for an enemy, and at the end they would meet, they would discuss, even they would have had a lot of diplomacy all along while they were fighting. As you said, they would discuss between themselves while they were fighting. Whereas we've entered this stage today where it's all black or white, or the good guys and the bad guys, and we don't discuss with them. And this is the death of diplomacy. And actually, France was quite a good country in diplomacy. It helped a lot that France was a big nation in Europe, and then at that time globally in the world. I mean, as France started building its colonies and all that, it has always backed its strength on a very strong diplomacy. And the French also at one time in Europe, all the courts in Europe would speak French. From France to Russia, everybody in the 17th, 18th century was speaking French. So it helps when your language is a language everybody's using to communicate. So you've got maybe a head start on the other countries. But France would have this, and whether it be Mazarin, whether it be Talleyrand, I mean, after Napoleon lost, I mean, France would have disappeared. They could have disappeared. Everybody would have been very happy to split up France. But France used diplomacy, and Talleyrand came and discussed and with the other nations and explained why this would not be a good idea. And they all talked around it. And they found a solution because they were interested in stability and peace. And they all agreed at the end, well, listen, maybe, okay, if you promise you don't invade us and you don't push your revolutionary ideas on us, okay, maybe we could find a way where you can get out safe out of this. You'll have to pay, of course, but you'll get out safe. But it's in our global interest, and we'll see what happens in the next war. But in any case, that's the way. That was that mentality that they had, and we couldn't. You know, it's kind of funny actually when you think about it today, because we're so far from that. We can't imagine that. Okay, let's have Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or even Mohammed Mossadegh in the 1950s in Iran, which was just defending his oil, Nobody would discuss with him at that time. So we've gone very far from that stage where people would fight, but they would discuss. And as Clausewitz said, okay, so we haven't been able to discuss. You don't want to give me access to the sea. You don't want to give me your minerals. You don't want to give me your land. Okay, so we'll go fight. And then after that, we still have honor. We still are gentlemen, and we'll discuss. So we've lost that totally.